Imagine you have no phone, no Netflix, no coffee. It's 40,000 years ago. You're sitting around a fire somewhere in what will one day become modern day Turkey. The sun just went down. The smoke is drifting up into a sky that has more stars than you've ever tried to count. And then something strange happens. A plant falls into the fire. The smoke changes. It smells different, richer, almost alive. And something inside your brain, something very ancient, tells you to breathe it in. You do, and you feel it. A warmth, a calm, a strange sense that the world just slowed down. You didn't know it yet, but you just took humanity's first hit. Here's the thing nobody really asks. Why did humans start smoking in the first place? We talk about smoking like it's a modern mistake, a corporate trick, a product that got out of hand. But the story of smoking doesn't start with a tobacco company in North Carolina. It starts with fire. It starts with shamans and rituals and gods. It starts with something so deeply wired into the human brain that, for most of history, smoking wasn't considered a vice at all. It was considered a gift. Let's talk about nicotine for a second. When nicotine enters your bloodstream, it hits a receptor in your brain called the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. That's a complicated name for a very simple idea. Your brain already has a slot that nicotine fits into perfectly. Not because nicotine is unnatural, but because your brain makes a chemical called acetylcholine. And nicotine looks almost identical to it. Think about that. The plant didn't evolve to trick you. Your brain just happened to already have the lock. Nicotine found the key. The result? Dopamine floods in. Focus sharpens. Anxiety drops. You feel, for a moment, completely present. This isn't a flaw in human design. This is a feature. Your ancestors who discovered this were not the weak ones. They were, in some ways, the curious ones. The first confirmed evidence of tobacco use goes back roughly 12,000 years. Archaeologists found charred tobacco seeds in a fire pit in Utah 12,000 years ago. To put that in perspective, that's before writing, before the wheel, before agriculture was even widespread. Humans were smoking before they decided to plant crops. But tobacco wasn't the only plant involved. Across the ancient world, people were discovering that certain plants, when burned and inhaled, did something interesting to the mind. In the Amazon, ayahuasca and jungle tobacco. In the Middle East, frankincense and hemp. In Central Asia, cannabis. In Siberia, mushrooms burned over coals. The specific plant changed, but the idea was the same. Smoke was a bridge between the ordinary world and something else. Something bigger, something the living couldn't reach unless they breathed the right thing. In most ancient cultures, smoking was not a casual habit. It was a job, the shaman's job specifically. Shamans across Siberia, the Americas, and Central Asia used smoke rituals as the core of their work, to heal the sick, to communicate with ancestors, to interpret dreams, to bless a hunt. The smoke wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. The tobacco, or whatever plant they used, altered the shaman's state of consciousness in a controlled way. It made them feel connected to something larger. And that feeling was real. The neurochemistry was real. The ritual was just the frame around something that genuinely worked. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Americas in the 1400s, they watched with fascination and horror as indigenous priests inhaled thick clouds of tobacco smoke and apparently fell into trances. They called it witchcraft. They wrote about it in their journals. They tried it themselves. And then they brought it home. Tobacco arrived in Europe around 1559. A French diplomat named Jean Nicot, yes, nicotine is literally named after him, sent tobacco plants from Portugal to the French Queen Catherine de' Medici. He claimed it cured migraines. Catherine tried it. It worked, or at least she thought it did. Within a decade, tobacco was being sold by apothecaries across Europe as medicine. It was prescribed for toothaches, skin conditions, intestinal problems, and, ironically, respiratory issues. Doctors recommended it. Monarchs endorsed it. Queen Elizabeth I reportedly tried it. King James I hated it so much he wrote an entire royal essay condemning it, which predictably made everyone want to try it more. By 1600, tobacco was more valuable by weight than most spices. It was the oil of the 16th century. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. Tobacco was profitable, enormously profitable, but it was also labor intensive. It required vast amounts of land and vast amounts of human effort to grow, harvest, cure, and ship. The Virginia colony, founded in 1607, was barely surviving until a man named John Rolfe planted the first commercial tobacco crop in 1612. Within 5 years, Virginia was exporting 50,000 pounds of tobacco per year. Within 50 years, that number was 15 million pounds. The demand for labor to feed that machine became one of the primary economic engines driving the transatlantic slave trade. Tobacco didn't just change what Europeans put in their mouths. It changed the shape of an entire civilization. For most of history, tobacco was smoked in pipes, or rolled into cigars, or used as snuff, ground up and inhaled through the nose. The cigarette as we know it is relatively recent. It was invented, or rather popularized, during the Crimean War in the 1850s. British soldiers watching Turkish and Egyptian troops smoke thin, hand-rolled tobacco tubes started copying them. When they came home, they brought the habit with them. In 1881, the first cigarette rolling machine was patented by James Bonsack. It could produce 120,000 cigarettes per day. Before that machine, cigarettes were expensive, handmade luxuries. After that machine, they cost almost nothing. James Duke of the American Tobacco Company bought the Bonsack machine, slashed prices, ran the first modern advertising campaign for a consumer product. He gave cigarettes away for free in immigrant neighborhoods, in hospitals, on military bases. By 1900, Americans were smoking 4 billion cigarettes per year. By 1950, that number was 300 billion. The ritual was gone. The shaman was gone. The reverence was gone. What was left was pure delivery of the neurochemical. Optimized, industrialized, addictive by design. Here's the part of the story that is almost hard to believe. By the early 1950s, the evidence linking cigarettes to lung cancer was overwhelming. Study after study, paper after paper. The tobacco companies knew. Internal documents, released decades later through lawsuits, show that executives at Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds had their own scientists telling them the same thing. So what did they do? They formed a secret research council. They ran their own studies. They manufactured doubt. They hired doctors to appear in ads saying cigarettes were perfectly safe. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. That was a real slogan. From 1946, they understood something profound about human psychology. People don't need to be convinced something is safe. They just need to be given permission to doubt the danger. It worked for 30 years. So, why did humans start smoking? Because a plant fell into a fire 40,000 years ago, and the smoke did something to the brain that felt, in that moment, like meaning. Because shamans needed a tool. Because soldiers needed a comfort. Because merchants needed a product. Because corporations needed a profit. The cigarette isn't one story. It's 100 stories stacked inside each other, a ritual, a medicine, a weapon, an addiction, a lie. The next time you smell smoke from a campfire, from a candle, even from someone on a street corner, notice what it does to you. There's a reason it pulls at something. Your brain has been responding to that signal for longer than civilization has existed. That's not an excuse, but it is maybe an explanation.